Welcome to the Failed Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Today we have a pretty good episode. The A7E Podcast from Edinburgh, Texas invited me to be their guest, and Adrian and me had a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Here it is.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the A7E Podcast. This is your host, Jiggadrin. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in into another episode. This is episode 31. This is the first of its kind. And what I mean by that is we are doing this via stream. This is the first time that I do this. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for me to be able to reach out and network with other people who aren't local and aren't able to come in. And today, we got a very special guest. And I say special because this is somebody, honestly, that I haven't met in person before, but I'm super excited to have a conversation with. His name is Sam Esquivel, the host of the Failed Podcast. I think it's going to be a phenomenal conversation today. Sam, thank you so much for coming on.
You forgot my last name, The Man. So it's Sam, The Man.
Sam the Man.
I got you. Thank you for having me on. Yes, I am the host of the Failed Podcast, all the way from Fort Worth, Texas. And I'm so happy to be here with you on your podcast.
Yeah, man. Honestly, I think it's so remind me how it went. Was I the one that reached out to you about about your setup?
Yeah, I believe so. I forgot what post. I put so many things up on social that I forget what bait catches someone's attention. And then I had reached out to you and we talked on the phone a little bit, and I just got good vibes from you, man. I've been watching all of your episodes. And I like what you're doing, man. Yeah, you got my support.
I appreciate you. And that's kind of essentially the same vibe that I got from you as well. I was able to watch some of your episodes as well. And no, it's really good. It's I love the way that, you have your conversations. I do like to think that, the things that we speak about are similar, but obviously everybody has their own style and whatnot. And I really like yours and the way you do it. But I do remember what it was that caught my attention specifically, and it was your setup that you have there in person. It was like a quick little video of like your audio recorder, your microphones, and like just your couch, I believe, where your guests sit. And I was like, wow, that's essentially the type of setup that I would like. Mine's a little bit different, but yeah, man, I always thought that it was a good setup that you got there.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, it took a lot of time and effort. I think I've been going at this since like 2016 or 17. I've produced other podcasts, and I worked on other projects and bought a ton of equipment. Stuff is like catching dust in a drawer. And I've ended up here after a long journey. And so I appreciate you, noticing that. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's, so you mentioned that, you had some things, catching dust in the drawer, and that's kind of what happened to me at one point. So I knew that when I first got my equipment, I did the intro. I think I did one episode with a friend, and then literally after that, I stopped. I had got the microphones, the what is it called? The arm that comes for the mic,
the boom arm. And stuff.
Exactly, the boom arms. I got everything. Yeah, and then so then I paused, and then I was like, man, you know what? Maybe this is dumb, right? So we start letting that, the doubt kind of creep in, and we think we realize that the picture that we had in our mind isn't the one that's actually happened when you start out with things. So then you kind of get discouraged, and so I stopped doing that, and I took a year and a half break when I moved to Austin. Wow. So I was coaching soccer, and then during the whole thing that went on with everything that was going on, where everything shut down for a year and a half, the biggest mistake, and I say it every other day, I massively regret not taking that time to produce more content. At the bare minimum, do episodes like this where I could have spoken to so many people who actually had time. I definitely get what you mean in regards to letting things sit for too long. So what got you going, right? So what got you going? Finally, you mentioned you produce other episodes for other podcasts. Yeah. Why did you decide why the Failed Podcast?
Well, how I started podcasting or the Failed Podcast?
Well, let's go with podcasting first, and then you can kind of ease into the Failed Podcast.
Yeah. So podcasting, like I said, I've been doing it for a long time, and I just love communicating. and I grew up, and the school system kind of put a mark on me and said, this guy is, his language, his second language is English. And I struggled in school. I struggled with reading and writing. And so communicating for me, it was never going to happen. Like, I used it just to get, out of trouble and stuff, and kind of just to be smooth. And then as I grew up, I started, I served as a youth pastor for many years. And so I started to write, and I had to communicate, 30, 45-minute lessons multiple times a month, 4 to 8 times a month, depending on what the month was like. And so that took a lot of learning, and it built my confidence up. So I realized that I could communicate, and then they were young kids, and I could keep their attention. So I said, well, I guess I'm kind of good at it, because it's not so easy, because I was like a long format type teacher.
Yeah.
And I continued to develop and figuring out what my voice was going to be, feeling comfortable with the way that I think, and then the way that I talk, And my mom was in radio forever. She was like one of the first. She worked for one of the first Christian stations around the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Really?
A long time ago, Spanish station. And so I saw radio, and I saw my mom do her thing. And then at some point I just said, you know what? I feel like I have something to say. I want to help people. I want to help the community. And podcasting was, it wasn't the beginning stages around 2016, 17, but I caught wind of it, and it was a lot harder back then. There was these, other programs. Now it's super easy. And so that's how I got started. And so I started with a few other podcasts, tried some host stuff, the co-host things, but I just didn't stop. And then the last thing that I did was I have a nonprofit, and it's about leadership. So I was doing that for a few years. And then COVID happened. I got sick. I didn't work. And I just had some failures, man. Like, it was just bad, dude. I was like struggling with some stuff. And then I was talking to my wife, and I said, man, I'm getting pretty good at failing. And I had to rebrand my podcast that was like positive leadership stuff. I was like, I don't qualify for that anymore. I need to change it up. And we came up with the Failed Podcast. I said, that fits well. I need to own what I'm going through, but I also need to figure out how it can be like something positive as well to put out into the community.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I can definitely see where whenever you have an intention to do well, an intention to have a positive impact, but currently through the journey, wherever you might be at, maybe you lack certain skills or certain impact effectiveness, and you kind of just felt like you weren't good enough, right? So you kind of felt, you felt like, hey, let me change my whole name of the podcast. But I like the fact that you were able to change the name of your podcast to what from the outside in can seem like a negative, terminology, failed podcast, right? Yeah. But at the end of it, your whole purpose, it remains the same, was to make a positive impact, right? So
challenges and failures, and just bringing out what did you learn from it? Like, I'm tired of it just like people failing, and then that's it. That's all that the world sees and hears. And I know that there's just more depth, man, and we grow and we become wiser and stronger through our failures. And so that's kind of what I'm doing here with the Failed Podcast.
Yeah, and you're completely right. I think one mistake that a lot of people make is they don't take advantage, and I say this like that, like advantage of the failures that they go through, of the hardships, the difficulties. And what I mean by advantage is they really don't dig in to take out as much as they can from it. They let life happen to them. They let things happen to them. And then they essentially just wait around for something better to happen, right? They really don't take their moments or difficulties as a lesson, or what can they learn from it, and to be able to use that moving forward.
I agree.
Yeah. So for you, how did getting into the Failed Podcast, right? How have you been able to kind of use the Failed Podcast name and use it for a positive, connection, positive impact for the most part?
Well, it's funny because every time I talk to people about it, I'm like, I can't, they look at the word fail and they're like, dude, you got to be more positive. Why didn't you, give a positive? I said, no, I'm trying to flip this thing on its head, man. I'm trying to show people that if we are more public and more open and understanding about how we felt and why we fell, I think that it changes the way that people chase their dreams, right? Yeah. The way that people are able to get back up. And I think groups, even as friends, you can help one another out whenever you're honest with each other. And so I always felt like, dude, I have some friends, they're doing so good. I've never heard nothing negative, no failure stories. And I really don't feel like I can approach them whenever I'm going through something, because when you start talking failure, guess what? That connects all of us, bro.
Yeah.
But like success, different money levels and jobs, that separates people. But when you start talking about failure, boy, that's the bottom. And that's where we all started. And I think that that's a great way to just start conversations with people and let them know, hey, I'm reaching out, but I'm reaching out by sharing this story, as opposed to just saying, yo, man, I need help. You know what I mean? You just share your story of failure, and then usually most people get the cues, and they know how to help. You know, they know, I think we lost someone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Give me a second.
No problem.
Right, give me a second.
Yeah. All right, guys, we got some technical difficulties going on. So remember, this is the first time that we do it via stream. So my friend and guest Sam from the Failed Podcast, he's doing his best to also be able to record the audio. That way he can have it on his end to kind of,
Dude.
Yeah.
I'm coming.
Can you hear me? All right, so still not back yet, but so he's doing, taking advantage of this episode to be able to record it, and have it for himself, and for his.
Oh, right, man. You there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Are you recording audio on your end?
Yes, everything. Perfect. That. Yeah,
I might have you send me the audio, but yeah, I just lost. Okay, I'm back.
No worries. So no worries. So
that's a fail. That's a fail, bro. And that's what the show's about. I don't worry about failures no more. When they happen, I own them. I throw them out there. Whatever. That's not gonna happen again.
Yeah. So what I was doing, whenever you were kind of trying to fix it, I was just letting everybody know that on your end, you're hoping to also record the episode and to kind of use that for you. That's something that we talked about. But yeah, man. So you were saying, if you remember what you were saying before, our technical difficulties.
Yeah, and so that's how I look at failure, man. I think it's an avenue to open conversation, and for people not to feel so lonely in their failure, because they hear the people around them sharing it and talking about it, and that kind of gives people permission to be a little more open about what they're going through.
Yeah, so and I completely agree with you, and I think that's something that we don't do enough. Realistically, we don't do enough. A lot of the times, and I kind of briefly mentioned this before on my podcast, about the social media highlights of other people's lives and the thing that they're doing. And sometimes we let ourselves compare ourselves to them and realize that our current situation doesn't look as good, right? So then we tend to feel like a failure. We feel bad. And then we get into a situation that becomes negative. But so what I've been able to do on my podcast with some of the guests that we have is I like to be completely transparent. And because you're 100% right, we don't speak enough about situations that are actually relatable to the majority of the people that might be listening or anyone out there, right? So I like to tell everybody that I just started podcasting, that some things that I might not do, or some things that I do might not sound well. I'm not even sure. This is where I am in my journey. I'm learning as I go. But it's not just whenever you take on like a hobby, or for this case, a podcast. It's in reality, it's anything that you do, especially because at the end of the day, not everybody starts out with 100% knowledge of whatever it is they're trying to do. So failure is literally inevitable. Like, you absolutely have to. So the fact that we don't speak about it enough, kind of gives us the opportunity to actually bring it to the surface and let people realize, okay, you know what, maybe, wherever they are right now is in a better spot than me. And they talk about all the failures they went through. So maybe it's just a matter of how many times I'm going to fail before I get to a better position.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, guys. Like, if you're listening, man, don't get it twisted. You can't fail and make the same mistake because, you're kind of stuck on dumb.
Yeah.
It's failing and then learning, right? And there's a certain point in our journey where we've had the right type of failures, that if you just shared it with someone that's maybe a little younger or starting off, you can really leapfrog them ahead by so much. And I think at the end of the day, that's kind of what we want to accomplish. We want to help people know what some failures are and maybe bypass some of them so that they can reach success or whatever, influence, whatever they want to do a little bit quicker then maybe I did. But if I don't share it, that ain't gonna happen. I'm just gonna be, in other words, I'm just gonna be sitting there watching them fail, almost like getting pleasure out of it. And I don't like that. That's why we should be open about it.
Yeah, and I know it's useful, I know it's useful for the listeners because I've had people reach out to me and be like, hey, I really appreciate that episode because when you spoke about this, it made total sense. It's a breath of fresh air to know that, maybe things aren't always, success really, really, really. And this is a massive misconception that I had growing up. And I would see these, social media highlights. Like you would never see anybody make a mistake. And it was just like for their like success trajectory, it was just always up. It was like, dude, either this guy is the most luckiest person in the world or what's going on, right? But then as I started going on, I realized that it's not that, their trajectory was always up. It's just that's always what they showed you, right?
Yeah, dude, like you can't let like okay, let's just say your goal is to be super successful and or to be super influential with a lot of people.
Yeah.
If those are your only goals, when you fail, dude, it ain't gonna work, man. I think that your fuel needs to be passion.
Mhm.
I think your fuel needs to be like internal. Like you need to know why you're doing something. And when you know that wholeheartedly, you can make some pretty big mistakes, take on,
Yeah.
make some pretty embarrassing mistakes, but you're going to say, you know what? I do this because it defines me and it's because of who I am. And that kind of helps you take the next step as opposed to staying down whenever like a challenge or a fail happens.
Correct. Now let me ask you this. What are some things that, maybe people can do, or have you ever had a situation, which I'm sure you have, being the host of the Fail podcast, where you kind of just felt like stuck, right? Like where you felt literally stuck, where it's like you had no thought process of
Mm.
where to go next or what to do. And you, for a second or for a moment, you felt that wherever you are, that's where you would remain for the rest of the time.
Dude, I've been there, and it's crazy. So I was just talking about it recently, and so I had a moment where I had that, and I wasn't thinking about the future. I couldn't get my mind around creativity or what I
Mm,
was going to do next. So I felt really, really stuck, and I didn't know everything I had learned up to now and all the equipment. It just seemed like, dude, this is not going to serve any purpose. But what helped me in that time, you see, the podcast is so important to me, and I'm passionate about it and I want to grow it just like all of us fellow podcasters. But at the end of the day, my talent per se, is to communicate and to bring something positive out into the world.
yeah.
And I know through other experiences and people that I communicate with and organizations I work with, I don't need a podcast to do that. So
Mhm.
this isn't my only avenue to be to be a positive role model to people. Now, if it was, and then I found myself in that position, I think it would hit me extra hard. It
That's what
is
you're
it
saying.
is difficult, but it doesn't stop in here. This is just, I mean, this is just the way to kind of reach the world. I know the world's big, but just to reach out beyond the people that I'm close to. But I fulfill my talents and gifts on a personal level with friends and community and such, so that doesn't happen. So I just, so in other words, I don't want to just be juggling one
Yeah.
ball. It just seems silly. So I find another avenue to stretch my muscle.
Man, that's a really good point that you make. And while you were saying that, I was imagining, people with certain talents, right? In this case, it doesn't have to be about speaking, communicating, making an impact, but maybe more of those silent talents, like
Mm.
art, those type of. So, but I like the fact that you stated with your talents that you have, you don't just, kind of focus it through one avenue, right? Like finding a creative opportunity to use your current talents for different avenues. So maybe when you get stuck on one, you don't feel, um, for lack of better words, like worthless or lost or stuck, because you can use those same exact talents for also another avenue that you were currently on.
Yeah.
And maybe one of the avenues that you're on where you get stuck, another one's going to make you feel so good and open up more creativity where you can come back to the one you were stuck on and then get back on your high horse and get going.
There you go. I think about like an NFL receiver, and all he's ever done is catch a ball. He knows how to run routes. He knows how to communicate with his coach, and that's it. So he's running, catching. He's amazing. And then one day he like breaks his leg, right? And you think, dude, like that's a hard place for him to be. But what you normally see in life is that guy will end up he'll find coaching as an avenue to exercise his gifts and talents.
Right.
And now he's going to be able to pass that on by teaching other people on how to do what he did. And that's what gives him that extra bump, so that they're not just stuck on that fail. And so don't be so one-dimensional. That would be my advice for people. Don't be one-dimensional. Yeah. Figure out what you do and how else it can kind of be a positive thing for the world, not just one way. Because boy, that thing breaks, and it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you big time. One thing that I try to also, do for myself, right, is I try not to focus too much on just like staying busy, right? Because one thing that I try to make sure that I don't get trapped in is you're being busy, right? So it's like not just being busy with things that don't matter or aren't progressive. Like one thing that I always try to avoid, and it's like an analogy that I always think to myself, is like I never want to catch myself sprinting on a treadmill, right? Because it's like no matter how fast you go, you're still in the same spot. So I always try to make sure that, whatever it is that I'm doing, even if it's small steps, right, with whatever I believe my talents are or my effectiveness can be, I want to at least just take one more step, further than where I was yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely always want to make sure. And it's, I think 2 days ago, I was up late, which is already, I hate staying up late, right? My sleep schedule to me is so important. And whenever I stay up late, I know that my next day is just going to be off. But I was sitting there stuck, and I had one of those moments, and I was thinking to myself, okay, sure, I'm farther than where I started, but where I want to be, I still have so long left to go.
Got it. Were you questioning the podcast or career or personal stuff?
Honestly, it was almost like everything in together, but I'd have to say the podcast the most, because this is the one that I'm doing 110% by myself, right? Like, and I mean by myself, it's like I'm having to, and I'm sure you can relate, I'm having to record videos, edit, post, produce, communicate, reach out. And on top of that, I have a job where I work from, 8:30 to 5. And then I'm trying to take care of my health. So I go to the gym, and then, I have a baby due in about 2 months. Yeah. So
you're
it's
ready,
like,
son. You feel bad now? You better forget about that sleep schedule.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're practicing. You're
exactly
practicing right now for when the baby comes.
Yeah. So, I was thinking to myself, and so I was like, okay, so what am I doing here? Like, what is going on? And I do have the, I don't know what you would call it, but the luck or the fortune to be able to be aware of that, like aware of that voice that really tries to creep in and be like, well, you know what? Why don't you just stop doing that so you have more time for? But I'm like, okay, but I really want to do this because this is what I really want to be mine, right? Yeah. So it's like when I feel the absolute worst, which was a couple of days ago, I could have took another long break like I did before, the 1.5 years where I did absolutely nothing, right? Or I could take a step towards creativity, right? And whatever that may be, setting up another podcast with you or someone to come in. I bought a microphone just to kind of get my blood pumping towards that area. And then I know that once I take that step towards creativity, I'll catch, even if it's just a little bit of momentum, to take another step.
Dude, I feel you, man. I'm just gonna venture out, and I'm gonna say, just the thought of becoming a father, okay, it will mess you up. Like you're trying to plan for something that you have no idea about. No, everyone that shares fatherhood with you, they're leaving a lot of stuff out. But I'm gonna tell you, my man, it's a beautiful thing, but it requires sacrifice, and nothing else matters. And the same way you're going to work for that kid, man, you can work the same way for this podcast, you know? And here's what I think: when you start weighing things in life and you start weighing career, you start weighing like creative projects and so on, I always look at the trajectory and I say, okay, here's my job. Here's the max earner at my job. Let's say it's $75,000. That's my cap at my job. And then I look at the podcast, and then I look at other, obviously, you know, Joe Rogan is at the top, you know, 250 million. I don't know. He got a ton of money, but the sky, or the glass ceiling for a successful podcast is a lot higher.
Yeah.
And so in essence, if you're going to have several eggs in your basket, the podcast is a good one. And I see your development. I see how you're communicating from the very first podcast that you did up to the last 2 or 3 that I've watched. You're a little more comfortable and you're communicating, and your thought, like my thing whenever I was podcasting is to narrow the gap between thinking and talking. And if that gap is, the more narrow you can get it, the better you're going to flow at podcasting. And so I can see that your gap is narrowing. And so I would just encourage you to work hard at your job, you know, do it with excellence, obviously, you know, but to not give up on this, man. I feel like you got something good. I feel like I like your vibe. I like your character. I like where you come from, some of your past stories that you've shared on this podcast. I think that's going to add to who you're going to become. And just, you know, let this be motivation. The ceiling for a successful podcast, it's pretty high. And, and you're riding your own ticket. And so if you take a break, you're the one that's going to suffer. But if you push the gas, you're also the one that's going to benefit. And so I would just say push the gas.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that so much, honestly. And I think that goes for anyone listening. It's like anyone who's trying to venture out into their own type of project or hobby or whatever it may be. I like what you just said right there towards the end. If you're the one who stops, you're the one that's going to suffer. But if you're the one that keeps going, you're the one that essentially, you know, reap the rewards of everything you're going through. So then, all right, cool. So let's get into the Failed Podcast a little bit more, right? So tell me about maybe your first guest and how that was for you. Up until maybe now compared to your last guest, you know, how do you feel? Maybe you've always been, you know, amazing at it, and if so, that's perfectly fine. But tell me about your experience of, you know, running essentially your business and your own podcast.
Yeah, so I'm 22 in for this, but I've done, you know, hundreds of episodes. I've produced 2 other podcasts. I've helped people be creative, and I've helped people like find their creative voice. And I've just done this for a long time. And so whenever I started in episode 1, I don't even remember who it was, but I think it was a friend of mine who recommended someone. He owns a bunch of gyms, you know, like MMA type gyms around the area. And he said, reach out to him. He's a good guy. He's funny. I said, okay, well, you know, and I was starting off, and I asked a few people, and they kind of like, no, I don't really feel like it. So I got bummed out because I was coming out of failure to launch the Failed Podcast. And this guy just said, yeah. And I didn't even know him. I said, dude, let's just make it happen. And we ended up having so much fun on the episode. And so, you know, when people support you, it helps you take the next step. And so I haven't had all the support that I need, just to be honest. Like, if people that want to do a podcast, it's going to be difficult because it's your podcast, not everyone else's. And so, you know, I've struggled with that a little bit. But as far as like developing my episodes or how I interview, it's just the way that I talk. Yeah. I'm not sitting down and doing something completely out of myself. I've always talked with people. I've always enjoyed storytelling and just the back and forth and listening and kind of finding the nuances in people's journey. And so I'm known to like interrupt people, because as people share their stories, they rush through them so fast because they've done it 100 times. They've shared it with so many people. So I'll be like, wait. You said that you did this. What really happened? And then that's where I find the nuggets, is whenever I interrupt. But that's just my style. And so I've always, in the last 22 episodes, I can say that I've been confident in the talks, right? In the conversations. But I'm always trying to improve. I'm always trying to become a better communicator. I'm always trying to make sure I don't, you know, I talk fast, but I'm conscious that I need to be understood. And so I read books. I listen to other auditors. I listen to a few podcasts. I used to listen to a lot more, back in the day,
Mhm.
but now I feel like they'll manipulate the way that I'm doing mine. And so I
Mm.
listen to it like yours. I'll listen to yours because I see what you're doing. I want to be supportive. So I'm
Yeah.
listening to a lot of friends now, and I'm trying to pave my own way and just try not to get like too distracted by the way others do podcasts, because I need to own the way that I do it. And so that's what I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to do.
Hey man, honestly, when you just said the last part, it gave me a little bit of chills because in the maybe last 2 weeks or so, I was like, you know what I need? This is what I said. You know what I need to do? I need to I need to watch more other people do podcasts so I can see maybe like how to do a podcast type of thing. And
Yeah.
sure, that's not entirely wrong, but I felt like I could have, and now that I'm aware of it, I can be, bringing more attention to it. But it's easily to slip into a place where you're trying to be like another, in this case, host, right?
Hmm.
You're trying to imitate maybe their personality or their type of speed of talk, things of that nature. But I really like that. I really like that because I didn't think about it, and I was trying to put so much attention and energy into this. I thought, oh, well, what if I just watch all the top podcasts and then kind of do a similar like that? But the reality is that you really have to own who you are, your character, because you are the host of your podcast. And the people that you want listening to you are the people who know who you are and who appreciate who you are and not appreciate, that you might be trying to be like someone else.
Yeah. And so, okay. So teaching all these years, and I've taught these, probably over 1,000 times I have taught. Okay. And I've written out what I've taught. But here's what I learned. So in the beginning of let's say when I used to be a youth pastor, I would listen to a lot of pastors, a lot of youth pastors, and they influenced me. So I had a hard time kind of getting
Mm,
away from the bad habits that I got from other great speakers. So what I started doing is, I'm an avid reader. I love reading books, instructional books, biographies, and such. But I read them, but there's no voice behind the text. It's
mm,
my voice behind the
that's
text.
right.
And so that's how I'm able to see what's out there, but not getting influenced with the way that someone communicates. And so it's important to read so you can see how to put sentences and questions and things like that together. But if you put a voice behind it, now you're putting a character behind it. And that's going to be a hard thing to separate. And so whenever you read the text with your voice and your brain, it helps you start developing the way that you communicate.
Yeah, I would have to 1,000 a percent agree with that. And also, I'm realizing, and I'm sure this is essentially obvious if you really think about it, in retrospect. As you keep doing this, you really start continuing to develop like who you are. It's not like yeah, of course you are someone, you have a certain style when you start, but essentially you start getting either more comfortable with specific things about yourself and those things start to come out more, but you're continuing to develop who you are. You're able to learn and be aware of the things that you can
Mhm.
emphasize on, whenever you're becoming essentially, in this case again, a podcast host. Now for you, right, you mentioned that you like to continue learning, trying to better your communication. What are some ways or some things that you do? You briefly mentioned you like to read, right? Can you kind of walk us through some things that you do for yourself that you believe are the most impactful and essentially benefiting you as a person?
Yeah. So I listen to a few speakers, and when I do, they're like teachers, they're instructors.
Right.
Okay, because when you instruct, it's like one way. I don't try to focus on communication. I don't like two-way conversations. I don't take in a lot of those because I think that interferes with the way that I communicate. So it's mainly people teaching one way, and I
Mhm.
think that helps for me with my cadence and the way I just present the Failed podcast. But the other thing, one of the biggest things that I've done that has helped me communicate and understand my voice so that I'm comfortable with it, and that is writing. And so, let's just say I was talking for 45 minutes. Okay. So to 2,500 words, sometimes 3,000 words, I would write exactly what I was saying. So
Mm.
my writing wasn't different with the way. Now, it wasn't, it probably, if I was in an English class, I would fail, but I'm able to write the way that I communicate. And so for many years, I would have my iPad or my piece of paper with my dialogue, with what I'm going to say, and I would read it verbatim. it would read the same way that I sound.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would just suggest, if someone's trying to develop their communication skills, write down a few questions and read them. Write them the way that you're gonna say them. You know what I mean? And don't change it. Don't ad lib. Don't do anything. And then you begin to trust the way that you think. And when you do that, you don't miss a beat when you talk. And when people kind of hesitate sometimes, from experience, from what I know, is because they're not confident in the way that they write. They can't picture the words that they're thinking and the words that they're saying. But I did that so many times, and it's definitely been one of the key things that has helped me in communicating, doing what I do.
I like how you said in English class you would have failed. And I think it's because so essentially what you're talking about is you're talking about writing down whatever it is that you're writing down, but in the exact way that you would say it, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Not trying to focus on it being too proper, or using the whatever, essentially not trying to be a big difference between the way you write and the way you actually speak, right?
Yeah.
No, that makes total sense.
And then, like, I study words all the time. Okay. And so I love words. And so I'm careful that I only use words that I not only know, but I've seen it used in context. Yeah. And so a lot of people just have words and they're used in the wrong context, or it's just the wrong flow. And so I also see the way that people present things and the way that they use language. And I wanted to add this as a joke, but I don't think an English teacher could be on a podcast and do what I do. But if I wrote a paper for an English teacher, I think she would fail me.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. I'd have to agree with that. So what other things besides, so that was for your communication aspect, right? I mean, I think that's a phenomenal strategy as well for anybody that might be listening. What other things do you do for yourself? Maybe what are some things that you spend time with doing? What about some of the books? You're an avid reader. What about some of the books that really catch your attention? What kind of books?
Yeah, well, they're instructional books. Like, for example, let me see what I got here. Look at this. See this one? Excellent Way to Lead. Mm-hmm. So I've read that. Okay, so stuff like this, I see the way that they're leading and dealing with leadership type things, and it helps me. But I'm gonna show you something that's cool. Yeah. So there's books about communication, how to talk, how to give a presentation, how to give a TED talk, all that kind of stuff. And so you see this book right here. This book kind of talks to you like how to respond or debate or use the right words to change the subject or bring in your point. So it's books like this that are instructional, but they're real life type things. But I also like biographies. And so I read a lot of biographies. And the reason I do that is to understand people's life and the situations they go through. I had talked to a pastor once, and he was talking to me about teaching, but he was a lot older than me. And he said, Sam, one of the benefits you have is that you still live in a lot of experiences. Mm-hmm. And as you get older, those experiences start going away, and it becomes harder to figure out something. You have to go and read them. You have to talk to people. They don't easily come. And so that's also what I do is I talk to a lot of people, and they share their stories with me, and I ask them a lot of questions, but it's never like even just asking questions that are just like bugging someone. It's in a conversation. And that also helps me to be able to do what I do and develop the Failed Podcast, is I understand a lot of situations, a lot of stories from many cultures, many races, different ages, but it's just because I've been afforded that because of the leaders and people of influence that I've had in my life, who have given me their time for me to talk to them and ask them questions. And then in essence, they were like my test subjects, and I can see that I'm having good conversations with people. They seem to be enjoying them. And that just translates really well to what I'm doing here. I think like if me and you were having coffee, if we didn't live 8 hours apart, right?
Yeah.
I think we would have a great conversation, but that just goes because of the way that we are. And so those are some of the books, I think I have, I don't know, over 200 books and counting that I have. So I hardly remember the book, but I remember the lessons. I remember the quotes. And so I can go back and open them and read them. But it's all mushed together now.
Yeah, of course.
And so the way that I am, that's what's come out of everything.
Yeah, that's
I got back here.
Yeah.
I'm listening. I'm listening.
Yeah. No, and that makes total sense. And I knew that essentially if I wanted to become, better, what
Oh,
we
let
got,
me see.
which is that one?
So here's another one. This is Lewis Howe. He's a podcaster.
Okay.
The School of Greatness. So this is full of stories. So I love stories.
Yeah. And he's a good podcaster. I've watched a couple of
Yeah.
his episodes as
Oh
well.
yeah.
So I'll definitely be looking into that book. And I'm very interested in the one you showed to the screen. Phrases and what?
I'm gonna put it up for everyone. This would just help you be a better communicator.
Yeah.
There it is.
Perfect phrases for dealing with difficult people.
Boom.
Boom. So if you have some difficult people in your life, which I know some of us do, you'd be a pro at it. You'd be an expert at dealing with those people, so you wouldn't have to worry about it.
Sometimes you want to be like, hey, just be quiet, man. I do not want to talk to you. And that's just not the way. It's just like, dude, what did you mean? Like, why did you say that? It just helps you create a conversation.
Yeah. The most impactful book that I read that helped me really communicate, and honestly the reason why I even got into it in the first place is because I was into sales, right? So I'm into sales now still. So I essentially, the biggest thing that you want to be able to know when you sell or is really to learn to have a conversation first, to learn as much as you can about the other person, to listen as much as you can, because that's going to allow you to identify pain points and things to essentially talk about specifically. So How to Win Friends and Influence People was the one that I read first. That gave me the opportunity as well to use my family members as the test subjects, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah, and I immediately saw the effect, and I was like, wow, there's something here. Now, I was blown away because that was the first real book I ever read, right? So then I started thinking
The rest were like coloring books, or
yeah, the big pictures and no, so and I started thinking, okay, I learned something from this book.
Yeah.
So then I thought to myself, what else can I learn from other books, right? So then that's why I got into reading, is because the reality it is, books are people's experiences who have already accomplished success or have real knowledge to give, things that work for the most part. And that's what I've decided to do, that I've been able to do at least until now, amongst other things, that if I wanted to become better, to learn to speak better, read better, obviously just to read more valuable books.
Yeah, man. It's so hard. Like I don't know why they say this. I just recently heard they say public speaking is one of the biggest fears that people face.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think that I think it's misunderstood. I don't think it's the standing in front of the mic and talking with people, because in essence, people like attention. Like who most people would love to be on the mic, and they probably picture themselves as a speaker who's amazing. Yeah. I think it's the confidence. I think it's the way that your mind understands words and the way that you communicate. And if that isn't at a very high level, that fear is there. And as you develop it, I believe it starts going away. But anyways, it's just something that when people say it, I'm like, wait a minute, are you really thinking about what you say? Because if someone has something to say, I don't see why they would be fearful.
Yeah. And I think majority of everything or how people go about their lives, right? Or go about their lives, the way they handle a lot of situations, the risk that they're willing to take. I think it all really does, for the most part, boil down to confidence, right? Mm-hmm. Like for me, when being in sales helped me. I think the biggest thing that sales has helped me do was really get used to constant rejection, right? Mm. The constant no, the constant get away, the constant stop doing this, stop doing that, being cussed out. Like, I'm at a point now.
Dude, what are you selling? I'm joking. Rejection.
Okay, yeah. But honestly, it doesn't really matter at any point when you sell anything. You're always going to find those people, right, who are just not interested. And I'm at a point now that, now when I speak to people, I expect to get rejected. Like, I literally, I expect to get rejected, and I know that once I do, it's on to the next one. Like, I have emotionally stopped being affected by essentially any rejection at this point so far.
Powerful thing.
Powerful thing. Very powerful. And I say that because I've experienced myself when I've been emotionally attached to the no's, to the no, you're not good enough, to the, oh, you know, this and that. And I used to just crawl back into my shell at that point, the earlier version of myself. But now, I'm able to take those things on the chin a lot better. I'm able to essentially, if those rebuttals or those comments come with value, now I'm aware of that value and I can take that in. And okay, now what can I do to be a better version now of myself in the future?
Yeah, dude. It's like as I've been podcasting, I used to, I would invite some friends because I need someone to come on, and they would tell me no. And those rejections were hard because I'm just like, bro, if you asked me to help you move, I would come through. I was asking you to come, and they didn't come through, but I got over that. I said to myself, I said, it's all good. I'm going to ask my friends once, and if they say no, I'm over it. Like, I'm not going to allow that rejection to settle and create any negativity. I'm like, it's fine. Either way, this is bigger than both of us, and I just got to clock in. I got to keep going and not get discouraged. But boy, they hurt, man. When those closest to you, when they reject you, it just hits a little bit different. And so I commend you for being good at rejection.
Yeah, no, and on the other side of that, I have to mention here publicly, and I have on other episodes of my podcast, I've been very fortunate. Okay, growing up, I've had a ridiculously amazing support system, right? From my parents all the way to essentially my cousins, right? Like I don't know how I've been so lucky to be so close to like both my dad's side and my mom's side, like cousins, right? So the last 3 episodes I did.
That's a superpower, by the way.
What is that?
Having that much support.
Yeah, it really is.
I'm the opposite, by the way. I've had minimal support.
Yeah, and by the way, before I mention what I said, hey, me and I you got my support 1,000%. I know that we were supposed to do the podcast like 3 weeks ago, but then it's like,
okay, man. It's okay. Yeah, I've been watching you since, so it's all. I just prepared me for today.
Yeah, so I made sure I was like, you know what? I know I told him that we were gonna do it, so I got to show him proof that I've actually been busy, and I have been, But and that's whenever I get into that funk, and I realize, okay, this is where I'm at. I actually feel like I had, the free time, so I was like, boom, this is the time I'm gonna reach out to Sam. I was like, we got to do this because if it doesn't happen today, I'm afraid that it won't happen for another long time. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Now, and that's why I say that, because I know some people don't have that support system. And I've been very fortunate, and that's a transparency that I try to bring to my podcast. It's like I don't want to give off the impression that I had this ridiculously like tough upbringing, or that it's even harder than what it may already be because I didn't have a support system. But I did, and I've been very fortunate to have that. And I like to bring that up because it makes me feel and have more compassion towards the people who don't, because it's already difficult with support. I can't imagine how much more difficult it can be, not having like a solid support system.
Yeah. And it's tough because I've struggled with having support from those closest to me, but it just doesn't land anywhere. Like I've just learned to work past it, and in success in the journey, especially of being a creative, the support at the end of the day that matters the most is the strangers, because the strangers are like, I don't have 10 million family members and friends. They're not going to make what I want the podcast to be. You know what I mean? Like they're going to give me 10 listens. If I'm expecting 10 million one day or whatever, then I got to be bigger than those that don't support me. And at the end of the day, they shall see. As ugly as that sounds, they shall see. But I find my strength through my gifts and talents. And like with you, man, like telling me like, dude, you got my support. I have other fellow podcasters who have shown me some love, and I'm learning. I'm seeing this other community, and they're rooting for me. I'm rooting for them, and that works. And that's what I'm rolling with now.
Yeah, and you're right. And
and I got to say this before I go and end up in the doghouse. And my wife,
okay,
she's very, 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 very. Did I say that 5 times? Yeah, supportive. She's my number one fan. She allows me to buy and rent this space and do what I do. So thank you so much to my wife.
Oh man, that's awesome. I know that again. I have that current support as well from my fiance. Even at the time of where we're about to have a baby in 2 months. We're scrambling for some things. But I told her, she knows from the moment I started. We've been together for I think 6.5 going on 7. years together. So she knows that when I started this podcast, it was important to me. She's also seen the work, that I've been putting in. So now when I mention to her, hey, I'm getting this, or, this, I have to make time for this person, because she's like, yeah, no problem. Now,
Right.
I want to say one thing, from that specifically. I have realized over the time that
You can
I,
cry.
no, no
Oh,
crying.
it felt like it
No,
was coming.
that's a rule. No crying.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
No. I realized over the time that when I first started here, and I was not asking, for people to come on, but what I'm realizing is, when people see you be consistent with something, when people really see that you care about something that you're trying to build or you're trying to do, their support comes a little not easier, but they tend to feel better about supporting you. Now, I say this because of this. I realize that the more, in this case, content I've put out, videos I've been able to upload, things that I've been able to share, people are coming out and supporting, saying nice things, sharing my stuff. And when I was very inconsistent,
Mm.
it wasn't much of that. And I understand now. And I truly understand now, because I'm also on that side of it when I see people do things as well. I'm a very big supporter of small businesses or people that are just starting their entrepreneurial journeys. I'm one of the first to support however I can. Now, what I am doing though, I'm not judging you. I understand life gets in the way. I understand doubts and fears make people stop for a very long time. But what I am doing is I'm making sure that you actually care about what you're doing enough to make me also care about what you're doing. And it's like, if you don't care or you're so
Mm.
inconsistent, so what is the reason that anybody else should care?
That's true. I love it.
You know what I
That's
mean?
the truth. Yeah, people hate that. Well, I'm like, well, how am I going to invest in you if you're not investing in yourself, man? I
Yeah.
feel it. I
And,
mean,
and it all comes down to, just to share, just to like. And we spoke about it briefly, over Instagram. Whenever I released the shirts, I was able to get that immediate support and was able to get rid of the shirts, in almost, 24 hours.
yeah.
And I think it's also because of the work that I put in prior, right? People see that, okay, well, he's coming out with shirts now. He's done so many videos. I'd love to support, because it looks like in the current state that he's in, that he really cares about what he's doing and that he's going to continue to care. So I want to continue to care with him and support with whatever he got.
That's great, man.
Yeah. So if you're out there, right, and you want to start something, you have to understand at some point you have to earn people's trust moving forward for them to essentially be able to feel good. You want the people that support you to feel good, man, when they
Starting it,
support you.
it ain't enough.
Yeah,
There you
no.
go. Let me give this humble
Yes.
pie out.
Thank you.
Starting is not enough. A million
Yeah.
people have started a podcast. 5 to 10 in, they failed. They are out. It is hard to get anything going, and it's the long game for
Yeah.
anything. Consistency, dude. I don't care if you grow $1 at a time. If you're consistent, that adds up. So.
Yeah, and I don't want to just kind of bring it under the podcasting microscope, but it's with anything. I know that I have a
Yeah.
friend that I work with here locally, who we started a uh, personal training, soccer training, soccer technical training business, and we literally started it in a park full of dirt with one kid, right?
Mm.
And I was with him for maybe 3 or 4 years up until like 2 months ago. But and I see him, and I have other friends who are doing similar work, and I see them, and they're putting in the work like day in and day out. They're and now, and I and I'm able to say this personally because it's maybe 10 minutes from here from where I live. He has a business. He has
Yeah.
grown that business. The attention and the support he gets from the community is it's not a coincidence, is what I'm trying to say. It's like the more
Yeah.
energy you put in, like the more love you put in, the more effort you put in, like the more you're gonna get out of it.
And it's crazy because I see your podcast, and obviously I know my podcast, and as long as we show up,
Yeah.
okay, this is for everyone.
Yeah,
We're
everyone.
going to get better, because
Yeah.
there's everyone. I want to be the best. I want to be the best. Well, how about you just get better because
Mhm.
you keep doing it? Like
Yeah.
that's just as valuable and just more realistic. Don't worry about being the best. Just worry about being better because you keep showing up.
One thing that I do want to say, and Sam, just so you know, I'm going to do my very best to keep this around the 60-minute mark because I feel like that's where my audience essentially enjoys it the most for in regards to engagement. So we got about 5 minutes. Kind of going off a little bit about what you just said, don't worry about being the best, just worry about being better. It's like one thing you also have to do in your journey of becoming better is whenever we ask for things or we pray for things or however you go about attracting the things that you want in this universe, you have to make sure that you're becoming better to actually receive those blessings, right? You have to become the person to receive those blessings, because if you receive those blessings, right, if you ask for something, but you're not the version of yourself that you need to be to actually receive those things, then that's the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah, don't give me 50 million right now, boy.
That's
I would lose it. I would lose it in a month. But I'm gonna have a whole bunch of cars.
Hey, I appreciate you saying that because
I know what you're talking about.
because that's exactly whenever I came across that and I thought about it, I was like, how many times, just in passing or whatever, have we thought about having a ton of money or being rich? And the reality is, and I had a conversation with my friend honestly over a year ago about this. He was like, man, if you give me like $2 million, dude, that's it, that's all I need. I was like, you know what, I have a huge suspicion that if you actually received $200 along with myself, I include myself in this conversation, I think we would blow it. I think we'd blow it in a year, maybe less.
I have a guy. It was Joe. He came out. He's on the podcast. You can look him up on my page.
Mm-hmm.
That dude came out and he shares all this. He came out of jail and he had I don't know how many, like $100,000 waiting for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and I blew it, man. And he blew it. Like that was supposed to set him up, but like his mindset today would have handled it better because now he does like internet stuff and things like that. He would know where to put that money, but he blew that money.
And that's what
most of us would. Most of us would. And the wrong idea.
Yeah, you have the wrong idea, and I know that most of us. I'm not saying everybody. Maybe there's some people out there that are ready for it, but I say that because you have to make sure that you're the correct version of yourself to actually receive those things that you've been asking for so long.
Yeah, man. I love it. Learn how to handle $100 before you start asking for 100,000 or 1,000,000. Like, how easily do you blow that 100? Think about it. Like, I will buy me some shoes, you know what I mean, and not buy Pampers.
Yeah,
I'm joking. I am joking, but I'm
don't
saying like that's a reality for some people, and that means you're not ready for more. Get the Pampers, man.
Exactly. Yeah, man. So that's, and I kind of wanted to wrap it up with that. But yeah, Sam, tell us a little bit about where, first of all, before we get to that point, I want to honestly thank you so much. Like, I say this to everybody and I say it in a very similar way, but the genuineness of the way I say it is so like bottom of my heart. Like, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. This is episode 31 for me. And I know we're essentially, very close in episodes together. And it's so cool. It really is cool for me to find someone who's podcasting and we're in a similar stage. You've been doing it way longer than me. And I know that you're so much more experienced than me. And the quality of how you communicate is very admirable. It's something to aspire to. And I like that. But I enjoy speaking to a fellow podcaster. You're the first fellow podcaster to come onto my podcast, and being able to hear your stories, relate to it a bit, makes me feel good. So thank you so much for coming on.
No, man. Hey, I appreciate you for the invite. I've enjoyed today, man. It's been fun. Like I said, over here, I'm way over here in Fort Worth, but you got my support. I'm watching you from a distance. I'm watching everything you do. You will be on the Failed Podcast, and so I want to have you on. I want to learn more about your journey, how you grew up, and just kind of dig in deep on who you are and the Jiggaman, or what's it?
Jiggadrin.
Jiggadrin, figure out the backstory in that. But no, I'm appreciative, man. And if anyone's looking for the Failed Podcast, I'm sure you can add the stuff in the description below. But let me see. There you go. That's me. Look, it's so funny. Look, our heads are almost the same size.
That is true.
And then I don't even know if this will work, but y'all try it.
We can try it.
And you can find me on all the platforms. So yeah, it's easy. The Failed Podcast.
Cool. Yeah, man. And I'll definitely be putting that that in the description for the Failed Podcast, your Instagram. Also you have it on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
You have it on
All the
Spotify,
platforms.
all the platforms. So
Yeah.
guys, there is no excuse right now. If you're not a fan of YouTube, boom, you got the other platforms. If you don't like the other platforms and you prefer YouTube, boom, my man's on YouTube. Please, for my listeners, whoever's listening to this podcast, go and follow Sam at the Failed Podcast. I would extremely appreciate it. Whoever's in my community, he's a good guy, very, very good messages in his podcast. And I think he's on his way to definitely make a positive impact moving forward. And I know that you guys will enjoy his podcast.
And I'm going to drop in my description all of your info, because I want all my people to follow your podcast and see what you're doing, and just to watch your journey, man, as you keep getting better and better. And so thank you. Tell me where you're from.
Yeah, currently I am in Edinburgh.